welcome to another video, another day, another video. I hope you are enjoying Vida so far. Today, we are going to be chatting about books that hit me in the feels, whether they made me cry or just shocked me or made my stone cold heart feel a little something. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I have 9 books and 1 ebook to talk to you about today. The sun has just decided to make an appearance. We're just gonna roll with it. I don't know what it's playing at. Like, it's been really cloudy all day and now sun. Anyway, yeah, so I've got 10 books overall to talk to you about today, and we're just gonna chat about why they made me cry, if I know, because there may be 1 or 2 where I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, how they hit me in the feels, and my emotions. So let's get started. One that I think anyone who knows me knows that this book is soul-destroying to me is Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. I have read this a couple times and it destroyed me both times. I wrongly assumed that going into this a second time on a reread, knowing what happens and knowing how it ends, the sun's now disappeared entirely, knowing how it ends wouldn't destroy me as much. That was not the case. It still did. It still absolutely ruined me. I was a sobbing mess. There is a vlog of that happening somewhere. This book hits me in the feels. I obviously will not tell you what happens that makes me cry, but the emotional attachment I formed with the characters throughout this duology just meant that that ending hit me real hard and I was a crying mess. This duology, the Monsters of Verity duology by Victoria Schwab, follows August Flynn, who is a monster, and Kate Harker, who is a human, but it's about a city that is divided between the monstrous and the human, and whether the humans are perhaps more monstrous than we know, and the monsters perhaps less so, what makes someone a monster, what makes someone human, but also the kind of civil war going on in this city, which is divided by 2 camps, one that like pay for safety and one that fight for safety, and August and Kate, who naturally should not get along, but what makes a monster and what makes a human a human. It's full of that morally grey stuff that Schwab does so well. I thoroughly enjoyed this. There's obviously a lot more to it than that, and the ending absolutely ripped my heart to shreds. So very, very emotional attachment to this one. Soul-destroying. If you haven't read this series, I so wholeheartedly encourage you to do so. If you read the first one but haven't yet read the sequel, do it. Just suffer. Suffer with me. Do it. Next up, we have The Empire of Gold by S.A. Chakraborty. This is the 3rd and final book in the Jadeyraereads trilogy, and my little heart. The end of this, like, the thing that happened, thinking about it, like, shouldn't have made me as emotional as it did, but the way it was written, it was so impactful and I felt every word of that. But, like, what happened, when I think about that thing happening, I think, well, yeah, I get it, that was bound to happen and that shouldn't make me that sad. But the emotion in the scene just made me cry. So, this also had that, like, heart-shredding impact on me. This is, as I say, the 3rd book in the Jadeyraereads trilogy, which follows a young girl called Nahri, who is a con woman on the streets of Cairo. She has an affinity for people's health and she can feel people's ailments, and she tricks them into spending more than they need to at her friend's apothecary. When she's performing one of her cons, she accidentally summons a jinn warrior who exposes Nahri to the magical world that she is a part of and turns her life upside down entirely. She then gets involved in all sorts of political ongoings in Jadeyraereads, in the City of Brass, and we also follow Ali, who is the prince of Jadeyraereads, and we see a lot of the inside workings from his perspective as well. I, again, formed very emotional attachments to these characters. I grew to love them and care about them. Therefore, the ending of this one and the emotional scenes we see with some of those characters just tore my little heart out. So, another emotional impact here. I love this series so much. I really want to reread it. Next, we have The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. This is about a young girl who is sacrificed to a witch in the forest. This town called the Protectorate sacrifice on a certain day the youngest baby in the town. They sacrifice it to the witch, leaving it out in the forest. The witch is confused as to why this village keep abandoning babies in the forest. So she takes them, she protects them, she feeds them starlight and delivers them to happy homes. However, this one girl, she accidentally feeds moonlight, and everyone knows that moonlight is the source of magic. So she's infused this child with magic and has to raise it as her own. This book, like, I don't know why this made me cry entirely, but it did. It hit me in the feels. It was so emotionally written. It was beautiful, and I felt the attachment with all of these characters, and I was so invested in their journey and what they stood for, and I just found myself, whilst reading it, not even necessarily realising I was crying, but I was just reading it with tears streaming down my face for no specific reason. I was just so emotionally invested in this book. I think it is gorgeously written, a beautiful story, and if you haven't read this, I really recommend that you do. It is a beautiful story of love and family and belonging and a little bit of witchcraft and magic too. It's really good fun. Next up, we have Tyrant's Throne by Sebastien de Castell. This is the fourth and final book in the Greatcoats series. This one, it didn't make me cry, but it shocked me. Like, I felt the feeling, I felt the emotion, but there was no liquid escaping from my eyeballs. But that does not mean I did not feel this. There is a certain thing that happens at the end of this that really just stabs you in the heart and gets you right there, and you're begging for it to not be true. And the feels are there. As I say, this is the fourth book in the Greatcoats series. The Greatcoats is one of my favourite series ever. Follows Falkio, Kest and Brasti, who are fallen Greatcoats. The king has died, and his Greatcoats, who were his magistrates who would go out and uphold the king's law, they are disbanded, and now they're trying to just make their way through by acting as bodyguards for other people in high up places if they can. Whilst also trying to perform their dead king's last wishes. It's very Three Musketeers-like. There's lots of dueling. The writing style is so my cup of tea. I love Sebastien de Castell's writing style, but I go on about it so often, you probably don't need to hear me do it again. But I love this series. It's so action-packed, so political. There's so many twists and turns and things going on in this. It's brutal, I love it, and the ending of this hits me in the feels. I recommend this series so often. You don't need to hear me do it again. But if you haven't read The Greatcoats, just do it. In similar territory to that one, I'm going to mention the ebook here, which is The King's Letters by Sebastien de Castell. This is like a 35-page ebook of the dead king's letters. So we know he's dead. We know that these are his last words, his last letters to his Greatcoats, and reading this after reading the Greatcoats series really just packs a punch, because you feel the intention, you know how things have turned out, it's so bittersweet and just heartbreaking. But there's really not much of a plot to this one, it is just the collection of those letters, but man, did that one hit me in the feels. Whilst we're doing Sebastien de Castell, we might as well get Crownbreaker done as well. Final book in the Spellslinger series. This series is a journey. We've come so far with Kellen in this. He's accomplished so much, and the ending of this is just really impactful. Again, it's not one that made me cry, but it's one that made me feel something and just cracked my heart just a little piece. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil a lot. This is obviously a 6-book series though, so we've come a long way at this point, and everything that we've learned, everything that we've been driving towards throughout the series comes to an end in this, and it just hits me in the feels. And I love Kellen, and I love Farius. It just gets me. But I can't I really can't tell you why though, because last book in a series, but I think it's a classic case of you've come so far with these characters, you've grown to care about them so much, and not only is it the end of the journey, but you've seen everything that they've been working for come to an end. This is the end of a journey, and it's very bittersweet, but so bloody good. This is obviously the last book in the Spellslinger series, which follows a 16-year-old mage called Kellen, who is about to take his mage's trials in the first book. One small problem is that his magic has vanished. In strolls Ferius Parfax, still weird to me that it's pronounced Parfax and not Parfait, who is an Argosy wanderer, and she may have a trick or two up her sleeve to help Kellen through, and this series just goes far and wide from there. More raving about Sebastian de Castell from me. Did you expect anything else, really? Next up, we have The Hearts We Sold by Emily Lloyd-Jones, and this is one that took me by surprise. I didn't expect to like this as much as I did, and I definitely did not expect this to have an impact on me the way that it did. It's a bizarre mix of things that I enjoyed and things that stereotypically I wouldn't enjoy. The backing to this, our main character's history and story just really hit me in the feels with this one, and I think it's because I relate, and I felt it. It felt very real to me. It wasn't the sort of book that I expected to have to like put down for a little bit because it hit me so hard in the feels, but it did. And I don't necessarily think it was because it was very emotionally written or that impactful of a story. I think it was just the way it affected me. I felt this book. I felt it, and I think it holds a place in my heart for that reason. I definitely felt the feels in this one. This one takes place in a world where demons are real, and demons will do deals with you in exchange for body parts. Some superficial deals will be accepted for like a limb or something, but the deal that Dee strikes is for her heart, and she meets some other heartless people who have struck a deal with the same demon. And after that deal is struck, her life becomes a bit of a nightmare as reality is flipped on its head and she's dragged into doing something for this demon with the other heartless people. It was really compelling for me. It was a fast-paced read. The main bit of the story is not what got me in the feels. As I say, it's our main character's backing that did it for me, but I still think it was a really solid book. And I don't not recommend. Next up, we have Potkin and Stubbs' Ghost Catcher by Sophie Green. This is the third and final book in the Potkin and Stubbs series, and the ending of this is so sad, but happy, but cute, bittersweet, just a little bit heart-wrenching, but everything you would want it to be, everything it deserved to be at the end, and I adored this ending. Is it what you would want for these characters? Probably. Does it still make it, like, gut you? Yes. This series follows Lil Potkin, who is a wannabe reporter. She travels the streets at night looking for her next big scoop. Little does she know it's sitting across her at the overnight bus station, where she meets Nedley Stubbs. And between them, they investigate the corruption in this town and a lot of other paranormal, spooky goings-on. I really don't want to say too much than that because I don't want to spoil anything, because there's one big point of this that would maybe be a spoiler that I don't want to risk saying. But the ending, the ending is just so bittersweet. I really enjoy this. If you're into middle grade kind of ghostly stories, definitely pick this one up. Super fast paced. Sophie Green is a great person as well. I am a big advocate for this series. I've raved about it quite a lot, and here's me doing so again. The ending is heartbreaking and heart-making all at once. I love it. Next up is a bit of a weird one, and that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I can't remember why I cried at this, but I cried. And I remember the crying happening, but I can't remember what happened to make me cry. But apparently this one hit me in the feels. Couldn't tell you why. Really can't remember. But I remember crying. Make of that what you will. This one follows a young girl called Cassiopeia who kind of works scrubbing the floors of her grandfather's house, I believe. Yes, it is her grandfather's house. And it's set in the Jazz Age in Mexico. And she accidentally frees a Mayan god of death and makes some sort of deal with him. In return for Cassiopeia's help to achieve what he sets out to achieve, he will grant her whatever she wishes. So it's then Cassiopeia and this god's journey of carrying out that deal and getting them both what they want in the end. I really enjoyed this. I loved the mythology in this one and the sense of adventure and all the different like creatures and characters we met along the way. I thought this was fantastic fun, beautifully written, a brilliant book. If you have not read this, I really recommend it. I thoroughly enjoyed it, had a fantastic time. It really surprised me with how much I enjoyed it because I wasn't entirely sure what to expect going into it. With the Jazz Age Mexico, I thought that it might be a little bit more historical than I wanted, but it wasn't. It was mainly this fantasy adventure with this god of death. So really good fun. But something about this hit me in the feels and I ended up crying. But I really can't remember what it was. But I did. So there we go. And then finally we have The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. The ending of this one did hit me in the feels. There was a little bit of frustration building up to it. There was some tension between me and the book as I shook it to get it to do what I wanted it to do. But yeah, the ending of this one was super sweet. In fact, all of this book is super sweet. You've probably heard it described as middle grade for adults or a hug in a book, and it so is. It's so heartwarming, so cute, so sweet, and there are definitely some really emotional scenes in this that hit me in the feels. This one follows a man called Linus Baker who works at the department in charge of the care for magical youth, and he inspects orphanages. Orphanages who look after magical children, whether they be shapeshifters, can levitate things, dragons, gnomes, etc. All sorts of magical children. And Linus is sent to the house in the Cerulean Sea to inspect this orphanage and see what's going on there and see if it's worthy of staying open. And the emotional connections that we build whilst we are there is so wholesome, so cute. Linus is a bit of a square at the beginning, like he's a bit boring, but you still love him. Like he's just a lovable square. And then we see his development, his growth, his emotional growth throughout this book, and you just fall in love with all of them. And I definitely did. This is a hug in a book. It's beautiful, it's magical, it's adorable. I really recommend. It is definitely a little snuggle in book form. So definitely will get you in the feels. And there we have it. There are 10 books that hit me in the feels. Whether I know why or not, whether it was crying or just some other emotional impact, these are the books that touched my stone cold heart. If you've read any of these, if you have any thoughts or opinions that you'd like to share with me, please let me know down below. If you have any books that have impacted you emotionally that you would like to recommend, I'm also interested in that down below as well. Because of course that's what we want from a book. We want something to make us feel. That's what I want anyway. But yeah, there we go. That's my list for this video. I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you've enjoyed hanging out with me for a little bit today. Thank you so much for watching. And I will see you again tomorrow for another one. Bye!